Under the Appointment and Qualifications section of the New York State Notary Public Law, which of the following individuals is eligible to be appointed as a notary public in New York State? Well, let's have a look at that Appointment and Qualifications section of the New York State Notary Public License Law booklet, and this falls under the header of Executive Law, particularly Section 130 entitled Appointment of Notaries Public. And it states, no person shall be appointed as a notary public under this article who has been convicted in this state or any other state or territory of a crime unless the Secretary makes a finding in conformance with all applicable statutory requirements, etc. Let's continue on in looking at Section 130. This is actually above the section that I read from before, but also in Section 130. And it states, towards the bottom of this paragraph, I'm going to underline it for ease of reference, a notary public who is a non-resident and who ceases to have an office or place of business in the state vacates his or her office as a notary public. As well, just above that, I'm going in order of the choices given as a potential solution. That's why I'm going above what I just underlined. A notary public who is a resident of the state and who moves out of the state but still maintains a place of business or an office in New York State does not vacate his or her office as a notary public. And finally, to the right here, I have an excerpt from the same section. It's a bit small, so again, I'm going to underline it for ease of reference. It states, before issuing to any applicant a commission as notary public, unless he or she be an attorney and counselor at law, duly admitted to practice in the state, or a court clerk of the unified court system who has been appointed to such position after taking a civil service promotional examination in the court clerk series of titles, the Secretary of State shall satisfy himself or herself that the applicant is of good moral character, has the equivalent of a common school education, etc. That's what's relevant for one of the choices, that the notary public must have the equivalent of a common school education. So with all this in mind, let's have a look at our four choices to determine the solution. Choice A states, an individual who has been convicted of a serious crime in another state and has not received a determination from the Secretary of State regarding their eligibility. Well, as I read from the law before, if the individual has not yet received a determination from the Secretary of State, then they are not currently eligible to be appointed as a notary public if they've been convicted of a serious crime, and therefore choice A is not the correct solution. Choice B states, a non-resident of New York State who does not have an office or place of business in the state. Well, as I read from the law before, if the non-resident ceases to have an office or place of business in the state, then they vacate their qualification as a notary public. Therefore, choice B is not the correct solution either. Choice C states, a resident of New York State who moves out of state but retains an office or place of business within New York. As I read from the law before, in such instance, the notary public continues to maintain their eligibility as a notary public in New York State, and therefore this seems to be our solution. But before we mark it as such, let's have a look at choice D just to be certain. Choice D states, an individual without at least a common school education. Well, as I read from in the law before, the individual must have a common school education or the equivalent, and therefore choice D is not the correct solution either, which indeed leaves choice C, a resident of New York State who moves out of state but retains an office or place of business within New York, as the correct solution.